So let's get some reaction to all of this, and we can bring in JAVED RANA. He's an expert on political and geostrategic issues too. You're very welcome. Thanks for coming on. I'm not sure how much you heard of that press conference there, but generally speaking, he was saying, look, we talked about denuclearisation. I think it's something the world wants. The question is, how do we do it? And he was stressing the need for North Korea to feel it can maintain its sovereignty and it will have guarantees about its own security.
I think that is at the heart of the entire controversy that we've been witnessing over the last couple of months. There were two summits with the President Donald Trump. Those failed because the President Donald Trump and his administration, they were trying to bully North Korea. They wanted the complete dismantle of the nuclear weapons, but in return, they were not ready to give them concessions, the kind of the concessions that North Korea was looking for. Now, South Korea, in the fact that there are 30,000 American troops are there, the fact that the Japan and the South Korea had American nuclear umbrella, I think that is a lingering concern for the North Korean leadership, and that is something which needs to be settled down. And today, what we have seen, what President Putin has said, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's not that Russia alone can help North Korea to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. It has to be done something in the United Nations Security Council, and there has to be an alliance of all these countries in the UN, where they can come together to a point where there could be possibly entire denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and that would also mean that there has to be international guarantees to the North Korea that its security would not be breached and its sovereignty would be respected. But let me point out here that there is a trust deficit between North Korea and the US. That is because of what Americans have been doing with the Iran's nuclear program. That is what happened with the Libya. I mean, Americans had a role, Britain had a role in the denuclearization of the Libya, and later on we have seen that the same country was bombed. So I think those concerns are still lingering on with the leadership of the North Korea.
Do you think this summit will bring America back to the table? They did walk away from talks with North Korea, but do you think they'll be influenced in any way by these talks that have taken place?
Well, it is hard to imagine at this particular point of time that the Americans would join again North Korea on any summit that previously have held. But again, there is no international pressure. China and Russia seems to be joining hands to bring a solution to the Korean Peninsula, because it's not just the nuclear and the missile program, the North Korea. It is also the threat that the Americans are imposing from the South Korea and the Japan, because Americans have given them a nuclear umbrella. So there are lingering concerns. China has its own concern. China doesn't want a nuclear state in its neighbor. Russia doesn't want a nuclear state in its next door neighbor. So I think, again, there has to be concessions with which Americans will have to come up with. Unfortunately, I don't see that happening so imminently.
What about the role of the United Nations and perhaps the UN Security Council here? Do you think collectively that can do something to kickstart the denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula?
I think that is where the role of France, Britain is going to be very important. We have seen in case of Iran that the European Union were not forthcoming when the Americans decided to dismantle that nuclear deal. And I think now with the summit with the President Putin, things are going to go in a way where there will be some pressure on the US, because China and Russia have almost joined hands. And more importantly, I think it really depends in what manner Russia and China move together to bring Britain, France on the table, where they can bring resolutions in UN Security Council to resolve this lingering dispute.
On top of all this, aside from all the politics, there are good economic incentives, aren't there, too, to improve relations in this part of the region? I mean, I know President Putin was talking about rail links connecting Russia, North Korea and South Korea, and potentially China too. I mean, you can understand why this part of the world would be keen to see this be a success, the denuclearization of North Korea.
Well, if there is a denuclearization of Korean Peninsula, that means Russia can export its gas. That means Russia can have rail links in the entire Korean Peninsula. But again, the Americans are not ready to give any concession to the North Korea. They want the dismantling of the nuclear and missile program, and North Korea has been insisting that they want all these economic sanctions lifted. Now, North Korea is in terms of mineral, it's a very, very rich country, and so many countries are looking at North Korea that once there is some sort of peace deal among all these major players, there is a stronger possibility of economic activity in the North Korea. North Korea is essentially now getting a lot of smuggled goods, and there is almost 100% ban on its export. So that speaks how people are living in North Korea, but there needs a solution, and I think that doesn't seem to be in sight in near future.
And finally, Javed, it's a hard one to know for sure, but I know after press conferences, I've seen leaders put a brave face on things and say, oh, yeah, it's been good. Well, behind the scenes, you sense it hasn't been the case. But in this particular case, it does seem that the two leaders did get on.
I think, of course, the two leaders did get on because North Korean leader had a lot to share with the President Putin. But again, there has to be some sort of solutions. There has to be some sort of mechanism. And I think some sort of blueprints of how to move forward must have been discussed during closed door meetings. What are the contours of those discussions? That's not yet known. But I think I can understand the economic difficulties that North Korea has been going through. My understanding of the situation is that if the economic sanctions remain in place, that means the smuggling from China is going to expand, because North Korea is left with no option but to rely upon the smugglings. They need vital, important imports from other countries. And even now, whenever these North Korean ships move outside its oceans, they face a lot of scrutiny, they face a lot of difficulties. So I think those difficulties are there, but certainly I don't expect that North Korea is going to hand over its sovereignty to the Americans.
Ilya, our correspondent there, was just stressing the need for this to include, this whole issue to include greater international support. I mean, you would go along with that. This is sort of a stepping stone, really, perhaps for more countries now to get involved about the issues on the Korean Peninsula.
Well, today's summit was basically a baby step towards having a broader consensus which could involve the UN Security